It's right about time to bring you up to speed with what's happening globally and in Nigeria. We begin with climate crisis. Typhoon Gayemi turns Philippine streets into rivers. New Zealand probe reveals 200,000 abused in state and religious care. North Korean trash balloon lands at South Korea's presidential residence. U.S. Senator Menendez to resign after corruption verdict. And Russia offers Moscow residents $22,000 to fight in Ukraine. On climate crisis, persistent rain soaked the northern Philippines, causing flooding in the capital, Manila, and landslides in mountainous regions as Typhoon Gayemi intensified the seasonal monsoon. On Wednesday, in the densely populated capital, rescuers were deployed across the city to assist evacuate people from low-lying homes after downpours turned streets into rivers. People clutched flimsy umbrellas as they waded through thigh-deep murky water or used small boats and shopping trolleys to move around. Government offices were closed and classes halted, while over 70 domestic and international flights were cancelled because of the weather. Pichi De Leon, a disaster official in suburban Manila, said many areas are flooded, so we have rescuers deployed all over the city. There is an overwhelming number of people asking for help. The typhoon, which has swept past the Philippines as it heads towards Taiwan, increased the southwest monsoon rains typical for this time of the year, the state weather forecaster said. Usually the peak of rainy season is July and August, and it so happens that there is a typhoon in the eastern waters of the Philippines that enhances the southwest monsoon, said senior weather specialist Glazer Escola. Over 200 millimeters, that 8 inches of rain fell in the capital in the past 24 hours, Escola said, which was not usual. Landslides killed a pregnant woman and 3 children in Batangas province south of Manila and obstructed 3 major roads in the mountainous Bunge province, police and disaster officials said on Wednesday. That takes the death toll from heavy rains over swaths of the country to at least 12 since Tuesday, as tens of thousands sheltered in evacuation centers. Taiwan shut schools, halted the stock market, and declared a typhoon holiday on Wednesday as Gayemi barreled towards the island, bringing torrential rains and whipping winds to its northeast. The storm is anticipated to make landfall in northeastern Taiwan by 10 p.m. local time, and President William Lai Ching-te urged everyone to put safety first during a morning emergency briefing. Authorities evacuated over 2,100 people living in hazardous conditions in 3 northern regions, mainly Hualien, a mountainous area with high risk of landslides. Wednesday, trains and ferry services were halted and over 250 international flights were cancelled. An independent inquiry has discovered New Zealand state and faith-based institutions proceeded over the abuse of some 200,000 children, young people and vulnerable adults over the span of 7 decades. On Wednesday, New Zealand's Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care said closely 1 in 3 people in state or religious care between 1950 and 2019 experienced abuse in what resulted to a national disgrace. If this injustice is not addressed, it will remain as a stain on our national character forever, the Royal Commission said in a final report released after 6 years of inquiries. The report said sexual abuse was commonplace, with abusers grooming those in their care and in some cases trafficking survivors to members of the public. Physical abuse was also prevalent across all settings, the report said, with some staff going to extremes to inflict as much pain as possible using weapons and electric shocks. Abuse and neglect almost always began from the first day a person was placed in care and often continued for the whole of their stay, according to the report. Maori and Pacific Islander people were aimed because of their ethnicity, including people stopped from engaging with their cultural heritage and practices, the report said. The Royal Commission, who spoke to over 2,300 survivors of abuse, made more than 130 recommendations, including legislative changes to make it easier to hold abusers accountable and formation of a ministry for care. Christopher Luxon, New Zealand Prime Minister, said the report marked a dark and sorrowful day in the country's history. He said the government will address the report's recommendations and make a formal apology to survivors in November. Now, South Korean authorities have said North Korea has floated more trash-carrying balloons across the tense inter-Korean border, with at least one dumping refuse on South Korea's presidential compound for the first time. The balloon that landed close to President Yoon Suk-yeol's office in Yongsan Central Shore on Wednesday did not contain any dangerous material or cause any injuries, the Presidential Security Service said in a statement. North Korea had launched more balloons towards its territory, and Seoul city authorities asked residents to report the objects and avoid touching them, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff announced earlier. Pyongyang's 10th round of balloon launches so far this year comes days after South Korea announced it will increase propaganda broadcasts across the country's heavily militarized border. Since May, North Korea has sent over 2,000 balloons across the border, triggering South Korean authorities to resume broadcasts for the first time in 6 years. The balloons, some of which have timers to release their contents, mid-air have contained refuse ranging from cigarette butts to waste paper, used batteries and compost. While the balloons have not caused any injuries or major damage, they have raised security questions in South Korea due to their potential to carry hazardous materials such as chemical and biological agents. Pyongyang has said the balloon launches are a reaction to activists in South Korea floating leaflets and USBs into its territory as part of efforts to undermine the regime of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Last week, Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's influential sister, threatened to enforce a gruesome and dire price on the scum behind the leaflet drops. Pyongyang has responded angrily to propaganda campaigns directed at its leadership in the past, blowing up a South Korean-built liaison office in its territory in 2020 and firing anti-aircraft rounds at activist launch balloons in 2014. Following his conviction on corruption charges, United States Senator Bob Menendez has announced that he will resign next month, including bribery and acting as an agent for Egypt's government. On Tuesday, the decision came as Menendez's fellow Democrats piled pressure on him to step down or face becoming the first politician to be expelled from the Senate since 1862. I will be resigning from my office as the United States Senator from New Jersey, effective on the close of business on August 20th, 2024, Menendez's letter said. While I fully intend to appeal the jury's verdict all the way and including through the Supreme Court, I do not want the Senate to be involved in a lengthy process that would distract from its important work, the letter added. Governor Phil Murphy, Democratic New Jersey, will appoint a replacement for Menendez, who has represented New Jersey in the Senate since 2006 and served as chairman of the influential Foreign Relations Committee before giving up that post after being charged last year. Menendez's current 6-year term ends on January 3rd. Murphy said in a statement he had received the letter but did not give details on when he will finalize the decision for naming Menendez's provisional replacement. Menendez, 70, was found guilty on July 16th by a jury in Manhattan Federal Court on all 16 criminal counts he faced, also including obstruction of justice, wire fraud and extortion. After a 9-week trial, 2 co-defendants were also convicted. The case centered on what prosecutors called bribery schemes in which the senator and his wife Nadine Menendez accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, gold bars and car and mortgage payments from 3 businessmen. In exchange, Menendez paid billions of dollars in U.S. aid to Egypt and tried to influence the criminal prosecutions of 2 of the businessmen, prosecutors said. Menendez, who plans to appeal, faces decades in prison. Sidney Stern, U.S. District Judge, has set the politician's sentencing for October 29th, a week before the November 5th election. According to Senator Peter Welch of Vermont, who was presiding in the chamber on Tuesday, the Senate received a copy of Menendez's resignation letter. Menendez's resignation will temporarily lessen the Democratic majority in the Senate to 50 to 49 until Murphy's appointee is sworn in to finish what remains of Menendez's term. Democratic U.S. Representative Andy Kim is running for the seat in November and is favored to win in Democratic-leaning New Jersey. Meanwhile, in the city of Moscow, authorities are offering a record signing on bonus for fresh recruits to fight in Ukraine in the newest sign of a scramble to increase Russian troops' numbers. The financial sweetener comes as President Vladimir Putin grapples to recruit soldiers for his army as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine grinds on in its third year. According to a statement on Tuesday, Sergei Sobyanin, Moscow mayor, introduced the one-time signing bonus of 1.9 million rubles, about $22,000 for city residents who join the military. Anyone taking up the offer will earn as much as 5.2 million rubles, that's $59,600 in their first year of service, the statement added. Those willing to join the fight in Ukraine can also receive one-time cash payments of around $5,690 to $11,390 for injuries, depending on the severity, and the family of a soldier killed in action could be paid $34,150. While Russia's casualty numbers remain covered in secrecy, approximations say the death toll among troops is high. Over 70,000 soldiers were likely killed or injured in May and June alone, the United Kingdom Defense Ministry said in an update in July 12th, as the Russian army faced high losses on a new front in the Kharkiv region. According to a source, it is projected that Russia has lost 87% of the active duty ground troops it had prior to launching its invasion of Ukraine and 2/3 of its pre-invasion tanks. As personnel deaths increases, the Kremlin is looking all over the place to find fighters to send to the front. Putin has ordered the country's military to add troop numbers by 170,000, which would take the overall number of Russian military personnel to over 2.2 million, including 1.32 million troops, according to a decree published by the Kremlin in December. That equates to increasing the Russian army size by 15% and marks the second such expansion of the army since Putin launched its invasion. Putin initially ordered an immediate partial mobilization of Russian citizens in September 2022, following a string of defeats that caused allegations in Moscow. The mobilization meant citizens who were military reservists could be called up and that those with military experience were subject to conscription. The conscription campaign led to fierce demonstrations, particularly in Russia's ethnic minority regions where mobilization efforts were concentrated, and has triggered an exodus of military-aged men fleeing the country to avoid joining the war. Although the mobilization campaign was halted in November 2022 after officials said the aim of recruiting 300,000 personnel had been met, Russia has been recruiting fighters beyond its borders to fight in Ukraine. Russia has recruited as many as 15,000 Nepalese to fight its war in Ukraine, with several of them left traumatized, while an unknown number remain missing or possibly dead. According to a Nepali soldier who, on condition of anonymity, said Afghan, Indian, Congolese and Egyptian recruits were among those being trained in Russia's military academies for foreign fighters. On more stories on Israel-Gaza conflict, Israel blocks Palestinian heritage doctors from Gaza. Jayab Suleiman, Palestinian-American doctor, arrived in Jordan last month ahead of an emergency medical mission into Gaza, which he was due to oversee. The Ohio-born orthopedic surgeon had already led 2 journeys into the besieged Strip since the Israel-Hamas war broke out in October and was concluding details for his 3rd journey. But his preparation will ultimately be for nothing. The day before the team was set to cross into Gaza, Suleiman received notice that he had been denied entry by Israel's Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories, or COGAT, the Israeli agency that oversees policy for the Palestinian territories and the flow of support into the Strip. According to internal memos from the World Health Organization, WHO, Suleiman's denial is part of a policy recently communicated to medical missions going into Gaza through Israel. The constraints block the entry of U.S. healthcare workers and those of other nationalities if they are of Palestinian origin or have Palestinian heritage. According to doctors from several medical aid organizations, the policy has forced them to avoid recruiting any medical workers with Palestinian background or ID on their trips. The rejections often come at the last minute, they say, leaving the groups with no time to fill in empty slots and forcing them to enter Gaza with an incomplete staff. Samir Sah, Director of Programs and Medical Aid for Palestinians, an aid organization based in the United Kingdom, said, "We have to actually tell people of Palestinian origin or Palestinian dual nationals that it is not possible for them to go in. We have to distinguish between Palestinians and non-Palestinians, which is not ethically right, which is not right in terms of humanitarian laws, and it's not humane." Review from WHO internal memos from early June described the level of what they call Israel's new policy, in which aid groups were advised against bringing medical professionals with a Palestinian background, even if only through a parent or grandparent, on mission trips. The change in policy came in May after Israel launched a deadly ground offensive in Rafah, during which it seized control of the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza and destroyed the Palestinian side. Medical aid groups that are dependent on the Rafah crossing for entry into Gaza have been forced instead to use Kerem Shalom, a crossing earlier used for commercial goods to get from Israel into southern Gaza. Palestinian medics and medics of Palestinian heritage who held other passports could apply to Israel for entry into Gaza and have no issues getting approval before the war. They will enter the strip through the Erez crossing between Israel and northern Gaza, which has been short since it was destroyed in the Hamas-led attacks on October 7th. Since the Rafah crossing was closed, Israel has further controlled the entry of medical supplies and limited the number of extremely wounded people who can leave Gaza. A probing march drawing on interviews with humanitarian and government officials and documents compiled by aid groups showed items often rejected by Israel: anesthetics, oxygen cylinders, ventilators, medicines to treat cancer, and maternity kits. Still on the news, bloodshed, how Bangladesh protests turned deadly. Anti-government protests have triggered nationwide turmoil in Bangladesh between police and university students. No less than 150 people have been killed, and some of those caught up in the bloodshed have described. One student said demonstrators in the capital Dhaka just wanted to hold a peaceful rally, but the police ruined it by attacking them as they were gathering. A student leader now recovering in hospital described how he was blindfolded and tortured by people claiming to be police. An emergency department doctor, meanwhile, said they were overwhelmed as dozens of young people with gunshot injuries were brought in at the height of the clashes. Security forces are accused of excessive force, but the government has blamed political opponents for the crisis, which broke out after quotas were enforced on government jobs. Most of these have now been scrapped on Supreme Court orders. Since Thursday, a nationwide internet blackout has restricted the flow of information in the country, where a curfew is being enforced by thousands of soldiers. Limited connectivity was restored on Tuesday night, with priority given to companies such as banks, technology firms, and media outlets. The violence is the most major challenge in years to Sheikh Hasina, 76, who secured her fourth straight term as Prime Minister in January in a controversial election boycotted by the country's major opposition parties. In African scenes, rescue underway after deadly mudslide in southern Ethiopia. On Tuesday, the search for survivors of a mudslide that claimed the lives of no less than 229 people in southern Ethiopia continued. The death toll, which added significantly from the original count of 55, included numerous individuals who tried to rescue survivors, according to local authorities. The disaster in Ethiopia's remote Kencho Shacha Godzi district was choked by heavy rain. Dagmawi Ayele, a local administrator, said young children and pregnant women were among the victims, with at least 5 people being rescued alive. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, shared his heartfelt condolences for the demoralizing loss and declared the activation of the Federal Disaster Prevention Task Force to assist in search and rescue efforts. The precise number of people still missing is not yet known. Numerous victims on Monday were laid to rest while rescue teams combed the rugged terrain for survivors of an earlier mudslide. Such efforts were ongoing in the area, as stated by authorities of the communications office in Gopher Zone, the administrative area where the mudslides happened. Marcus Malese, the director of the Disaster Response Agency in Gopher Zone, reported that many rescuers are still unaccounted for. Landslides are a common occurrence during Ethiopia's rainy season, which started in July and is anticipated to continue until mid-September. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, more stories, particularly from Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Now, stories from Nigeria. Tinubu urges youths to cancel protests over hardship. President Bola Tinubu has called on Nigerian youths to cancel their planned protests and wait the government's reactions to their grievances. Mohammed Idris, Minister of Information and National Orientation, revealed this yesterday following a meeting with the president at the presidential villa in Abuja. He said the president is attentive to the voices of young Nigerians and is working assiduously to tackle their grievances. The minister emphasized recent developments to underscore the government's commitment to addressing national issues. He listed the developments to include the National Assembly's swift passage of the National Minimum Wage Bill, transmitted just a day prior, distribution of grains and rice to state governments to alleviate food insecurity, launch of a student loan program to ensure access to higher education regardless of financial background, and plans for a post-NYSC support scheme for unemployed graduates. Idris stressed that these initiatives are part of Tinubu's wider vision for an inclusive government that leaves no one behind. And finally, on the news, NAS approved 70,000 naira new minimum wage bill. On Tuesday, the Senate passed the latest national minimum wage bill to empower Nigerian workers to earn no less than 70,000 naira every month. In the House of Representatives, the bill was killed second reading. The executive bill seeks to amend the minimum wage from 30,000 naira to 70,000 naira and decrease the review period for 5 years to 3 years. Yesterday, President Bola Tinubu transmitted the new minimum wage bill to both chambers of the National Assembly, looking for expeditious backing of the lawmakers for its passage. Godswill Akpabio, the Senate President, announced the passage of the bill during the plenary after the senators supported it. The President Tinubu's letter containing details of the minimum wage was first read by Akpabio. The Senate leader, Okpeyemi Bamidele, thereafter moved a motion to refer the bill to the Committee of the Whole for immediate consideration of the bill clause by clause. The motion was subsequently seconded by the minority leader, Abba Moro. The Senate President then directed members of the upper chamber to refer it to the Committee of the Whole for consideration. At the committee, none of the senators debated or spoke on the bill before the clause by clause was approved. After approving the bill clause by clause, the Senate President put the passage to vote, and the senators supported it through the voice votes. In the House, the majority leader of the House, Julius Ohomvere, led the debate on the bill. Ali Ndume, Borno South Senator, had recently criticized the new 70,000 naira minimum wage. A member of the All Progressives Congress APC, as the president, Ndume said the approved minimum wage cannot sustain a household because it can only buy 50 kg of rice. The senator based his argument on the fact that numerous Nigerians are hungry and angry towards the government because of the harsh economy. He advised the president to review the minimum wage in the interest of Nigerian workers. Another look at the top stories. Typhoon Gayemi turns Philippines streets into rivers. New Zealand probe reveals 200,000 abused in state and religious care. North Korean trash balloon rants at South Korea's presidential residence. U.S. Senator Menendez to resign after corruption verdict. And Russia offers Moscow residents $22,000 to fight in Ukraine. And that's all on the news. Enjoy the rest of your day. I am Lois Duraki.